Let me start in the before times. If you can remember the year of our Lord 2020, a few things have happened between now and then. In March of that year, as editor of the American Mind at the Claremont Institute, I published an anonymous author. I think it's one of the first times a true Twitter anon was published by an established publication on the right. And this author wrote in this, I still can't believe I was able to publish this. Thank you, Ryan Williams, president of the Claremont Institute, for allowing me to do it. This author wrote, "For clarity's sake, let's say that I am, as the very online put it, a retard." Quite proudly, too. It is right there in my Twitter bio for all to see. And the article was against the midwit expertise, and the author, then known only as Lomez, is now known to all of you as Jonathan Kieperman, who runs the Passage Press, the Passage Prize, and quotes Heidegger at national conservatism conferences. The very next month, in April of that year, we published an article entitled "End the Globalization Gravy Train." This was by a guy in his 30s who seemed to be very interested in running for office. He had made some remarks that were not kind to Donald Trump, but he seemed to be coming around to him. And this article inspired a young man from Texas to start a nonprofit dedicated to staffing the next Trump administration. And the author of that article was, of course, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, and Saurabh Sharma is now sitting in the Presidential Personnel Office working directly for the President of the United States. So, in short, we've come a long way, right? And I'm not tired of winning, and neither are you. But we just did win bigly in November. And now we need to transfer from what I would call a vanguard mindset into a winning mindset. I'm not tired of winning, but we need to think more seriously about that goal, about what winning looks like. Those days at the American Mind and a lot of the publications around at the time, a lot of the people who are here at this conference, I mean, those were heady days, and looking back, they were fun times. They were days of dissent. They were days that were about establishing a political vanguard that was going to spearhead. It was going to take all the arrows from everyone, right? We all took crap from various people, especially on the right, establishing a vanguard that was going to lead the movement forward. And this is, by the way, what the left did decades ago, right? Establish a political and cultural vanguard that then became the legacy institutions, the mainstream that we see dying today. But in order to get to the next step, we have to drop the minority mindset. We have to drop the dissenting mindset because we're no longer dissenting. So let me run through a list of really bullet points about the way to sort of rethink or reshape the way you think about where we are today. In the past, in those days, the line online, but I think everyday people who aren't online understand it, was that nothing ever happens. Right? Nothing really changes. We live in a calcified society with an established prestige ladder, and it's really quite boring. It's bureaucratic. Everyone knows what they're supposed to say. They know the tropes that get them ahead. And no matter what the right did, right, there was no way to really change that, and nothing really fundamentally changes. Nothing ever happens. Well, since November, I would suggest we live in an era in which everything happens all the time. Since really the assassination attempt, if you're in media, I mean, everything happens all the time. We're on an accelerated timeline right now. And you can sense this, you can feel it in just how Trump physically moves through the White House, right? When you see him on the roof, because you can just do things, apparently, and move things around the White House, right? And talk to the media from the roof, you get the kind of visceral sense that, we're in a completely different timeline than we were before November. And if we're going to speak about that in broad terms, what's happening is this incredible energy was unleashed. It's driven, all of this is driven by the greatest political comeback in American history. The source of what's now driving, what's moving, the only thing that's interesting in American culture and politics is the MAGA Maha mandate and the big, beautiful coalition that propelled it to victory. And that means that, ladies and gentlemen, what we do in media on the right also needs to change. This is no longer the same existential struggle between a divided country all thinking about presidential elections, and it's now a big, beautiful coalition that is in power and that is wrangling within itself to decide what the next era, what the golden age should look like, what the next era of American history should look like. And so in that environment, a number of things change. Number one, robust debate on the right. It will reoccur. We will have that will happen again. We are used to fighting the other side. We need to be able to have intelligent battles, tough battles within that big, beautiful coalition. A sign of winning is that you have a number of people who don't agree on everything, who are all part of the same coalition. And you see that in this conference, right? I mean, from Rachel Bovard, her opening speech, throwing down the gauntlet on transhumanism and our tech friends, to Max Abrams and Kurt Mills wrangling about foreign policy. So just as the censorship on the left is dwindling, self-censorship on the right has to end. This should be a confident movement. We are in charge. We are in a great position, and we have debates. I mean, you can't tell me that. I think it's interesting, right? It's fascinating to the audience, and it should be fascinating to everyone here to wrangle about what policies should actually be implemented in the United States of America. And of course, there's some obvious divisions, right? I mean, Maha Moms and Palantir Bros probably don't agree on everything, right? But somewhere in there, they agree on some interesting stuff, and that is an interesting debate. The second thing that I would say, besides allowing for debate, is that the interesting enemies for the right have changed. Yes, you know, Mamdani and you know, some who's the next Democratic leader going to be? That's all interesting, but it's much less interesting than it used to be, because after all, the actual enemy, the proximate enemy that people are worried about, they want to see the agenda implemented, right? In order to Trump was always a rejection of the Republican Party, and now all of a sudden, you know, MAGA Maha is in charge. So what's going to happen next? Who's the enemy? It's not so much the Democrats, it's the administrative state or the deep state, right, and whoever supports it. So the audience is just as interested in who's going to replace Mitch McConnell as it is who's going to be, you know, how communist the mayor of New York next mayor of New York is going to be. They're very keenly interested in reforming, actually following through on the mandate of the administration. And that means that the focus has to change for right-leaning media. People want to know, whether they're billionaires or whether they're, you know, regular people, they want to know what the hell is going on in this town that we're in today, and how does it actually change? Is the mandate actually going to be implemented? Will the full takeover of the Republican Party actually happen? And I think that there's probably not even enough fear here about the seriousness with which the base feels about this. And so that means that the focus has to change. There's a lot more interest in how the system actually works, what are the real obstacles to it, and it's less about Republicans versus Democrats than it is about MAGA Maha versus what you could call the Borg. So in other words, the era of dissent is over. The alternative stream has already moved to Maine, and our content has to follow that. Yes, you know, the phrase goes, you can just do things, as I said earlier, but now you have to just do the thing. You actually have to become, right, the leader in media. And that's a very different prospect. That's a very different goal than the one that everyone had before November. There's a number of ways to look at this. One of them is just the visuals. So just think about the aesthetics you see in the young Zoomers running the ICE social media account, which I love, right? You see a different set of images, a different kind of media. It's very online. It's very very online, but it also speaks to a lot of people. It's big. It's bold. It's American. You see these images and these videos coming about. They look completely different than anything in the past, and it's unbelievable. They're coming right from the U.S. government, right? And that's a wonderful thing. But what needs to happen now is the aesthetic needs to turn from dissent, from being edgy, right, to being big, bold, beautiful, mainstream. And you're already starting to see that happen on the edges of things, but you're going to see a lot more of that in the next few years. This also means, of course, that, you know, dissent is about political commentary. It's about decrying the powerful institutions. But what's needed if you want to now take the lead to actually replace legacy institutions is to do normal things, right? Do the things that media does in general, which is, as I think a lot of people here realize, where are the profiles of people, products, habits, ways of life, how to use technology without abusing the human. Where is all that stuff about the rest of life that comes along with this kind of deep cultural shift? And you already see people trying to speak to that, but we're nowhere close to where we would need to be to replace even like a newspaper, 20 years ago with all the kinds of content they have. The fact that we have to say, oh, we have one guy who reviews film pretty well, maybe there's 2 or 3 of them. That's pathetic, right? That's not a winning mindset. That's a bunch of people who are focused, right, still on dissent. In other words, the goal is no longer to destroy the New York Times, CNN, the Washington Post, and all the rest of the legacy media. The goal is and must be to truly take their place. The goal is not to get a mention in Axios or Politico, but to replace Axios and Politico. Where's our playbook about this administration? A bunch of people here have access. Why don't we have our own outlet doing that, right? Something that everyone needs. It wasn't just USAID, although they certainly helped, but a lot of people subscribe to these publications because they do give them actionable information, right? Normal stuff. So in sum, the golden age is real, but to be fully realized, it's got to provide the sort of content that's more than political commentary. As we know, talk is cheap. Podcasters, God bless them, are a dime a dozen. And people are looking now for full-service brands that they can trust. Brands aren't going away. Brands are actually more important than ever because people don't trust the old brands. And when I say brand, I mean a recognizable entity that actually elevates real experts and authorities with something to say, that brands that reveal what's actually happening in culture and government alike, that name actual bad guys and obstacles to culture and obstacles to the structural deep reform of the deep state that now so much of the general population is keenly interested in. So all that being said, we can talk about this more in the discussion afterwards. This is an extremely difficult task. This is a much bigger goal than we had before. And as the failure of many outlets attempting to try this reveals, it's not something that's going to happen easily, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It requires a lot of different elements. It requires, among other things, executive teams and advertising and sponsors that are far larger, structured in a very different way than what you see now in our space. And it presents an interesting question. Can old companies, existing outlets, reform themselves to take advantage of this opportunity, or will you need entirely new companies to take their place? No one knows the answer to that, right? We're sitting here as Barry Weiss and the Free Press, just melded into CBS, right? Is that a great thing and a sign of what we're talking about? We should discuss that in our discussion after our remarks. But that's the looming question for right-leaning media in America, and it's only going to be answered by those who actually successfully do the thing. Thank you.